and I didn't know what I was playing, so I didn't know if I was playing a human, whatever it was. I walk in there and I see the Starfleet uniform, and I see the USS Enterprise badge. I'm like, arm. I'm like, oh, I'm really here.
We're joined by a good friend of the Captain's Quadrant, David Jones. You may know David Jones as being a background actor, male model, and good old Canadian kid. David, thank you for being our inaugural guest on Section 31 and a half Personnel Files.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's always a pleasure joining you guys. I love hanging out with my friends.
Yes, and you know, we first got introduced. Well, I first got introduced to you via our Captain Joe Dove, who booked you in as a guest on the show, and said, "Oh no, this guy was a background actor on Strange New Worlds," and you know, my immediate reaction is, "Cool, let's get him on, let's have a chat." But you know what? The one thing that struck me about you when we got to speak to you, David, is you're a real fan. It wasn't just a gig for you, it was something that you absolutely loved being part of. And so to start it off, where did your Star Trek fandom come from? Like, what was your entry point into the Star Trek universe?
So my entry point would have been my grandma. We used to watch TNG after school. Back in the elementary school days of me. Me being in sixth grade or whatever it was back then. I totally forget. And it was just watching that into the next generation. That's when I really got into it. After school, 4 p.m. Oh, TNG's on. Better go watch that with the grandparents. And um, I think my first Star Trek movie, if I'm not mistaken, was First Contact that I saw. I
What a
can't
great one to start with.
I can't remember if I saw Generations in theaters, but I definitely remember seeing First Contact.
That's cool. You know, it's interesting because I didn't get into Star Trek until my late teens. Is when my entry, and the reason is here in Australia, the only way you could see it was usually very, very late at night on one of our channels who didn't really play it consistently. So how I got into it was via VHS, via the video shop, because Paramount released seasons of the show with 2 episodes per tape. So you'd have like 12, 13 cassette tapes you'd have to rent and watch it that way. What do you think it was about Star Trek that kind of got you? Was it more like, hey, I'm doing it with my grandparents, love my grandparents, so we're just hanging out? What attracted you to the show, though? Because for me, it was all about the mystery. When I got into it, I love a good mystery,
Yeah.
and Star Trek is chockers full of mysteries, of course. What was it about Star Trek that kind of got you hooked in?
I think it as well too. I think it was a part of the Star Wars fandom, like me being a big Star Wars fan as well too. I think I was just saw the re-release in theaters of the Return of the Jedi before the Phantom Menace came out. So I think that
Mm.
had a lot of it into it. And I always love space and what humanity could look like and hopefully becomes down the road. And it just all caught me. And it
Yeah.
here we are all these years later, right?
Well, the one thing that struck me is like everyone's actually generally nice to each other in Star Trek,
Yep.
you know, and it's they work together. Like that's I think one of the other things I went, wow, that's like totally different. But like you, man, I'm a Star Wars kid myself. Like grew up, like it was almost infused into
Yeah.
my soul because I'd seen it at age 4. So the original Star Wars: A New Hope in cinemas, age 4. It is the first cinematic memory I have. So yeah, my whole childhood, and another reason I was late to Star Trek was just being locked into that side of the fence.
Hmm. But the
But
movies
yeah,
were
I mean,
so
like,
the movies were so fantastic. The Kirk movies, it like obviously besides how slow the motion picture was, every other movie from then on was absolutely fantastic. So it just drew you in, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. And I was seeing those movies myself as well in the 80s. Like I actually was taken to go and see the motion picture and I know I fell asleep and I think I was They're not 1979, so I was 6 at the time, so I know I fell asleep. But The Wrath of Khan, I think at that age that blows you away, and the search for you have that triple whammy. You've
Yep.
got Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and then A Voyage Home.
Hmm.
And those three movies in the 80s when they came out and me going to see them was like, these are just great films. Until we get to 1989, of course, and we get the Final Frontier. But,
Hey, I have said this on the Captain Squadron a few times. I still love The Voyage Home. It was not the greatest movie, but damn, it had some
the
great
Final
moments.
Frontier,
Yep, The Final Frontier had some damn great
yeah,
moments.
yeah, yeah. Look,
It was
it's
fun.
one of those things where if it would have been so interesting just to have let him turn it to 11. Let Kirk, basically who directed the movie, just give him the budget and let him do what he wanted to do.
Yep.
Because it's such a bold idea. Let's go meet God, basically.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And
but
we get all the
yeah,
classic moments, "Now how come you don't know row, row, row your boat?" Like it just worked.
yeah,
The
yeah,
humor worked. It was a
yeah.
lame movie, but it was fun and it still holds dear to my heart.
Yeah, it's actually, in a way, out of all the Star Trek films from that period, it does feel very connected to the original series.
Yep.
And they do that. I even think in Voyage Home as well. That feels very classic TV series Star Trek.
Yep.
And Final Frontier is absolutely, absolutely. So we
And then,
fast forward, like
then we go
you're into
into
this, right?
Star Trek
Sorry.
6. And then we go into Star Trek 6 and it's like, wow.
Yeah, and you know what? With that film especially, and I remember the time, I mean, at that thing, I am seeing everything at the cinema in that period in my life. And there was a little bit of hype around it, but there wasn't a lot. Obviously, this is pre-internet. There's no real buzz. I think the zeitgeist at the moment was like, geez, these guys are too old. Why are they doing number 6? The last one was terrible. But as we all know, one of the great redeeming movies for that cast, and a perfect send off for them.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're pretty well soaked in Star Trek genre, like
As
as a
much as I
kid.
can.
Star Wars you mentioned as well. Like you were
Yep.
a big Star Wars kid as
I've
well.
grown, yeah, I've grown up. I was in theaters with my uncle in '99 when, The Phantom Menace came out, and, that blew us all away. Uh, I think it's still like the wardrobe was amazing. It still holds out to this day. The pod racing scene. We had a great video game that came out with that. Not long
Yeah,
after the
Star
movie
Wars
came
One
out.
Racer.
The pod racer was a great game. I loved it. And then obviously, the score was beautiful. It's we all want to play. We all want a lightsaber, right? We all try to do the whole
Yeah.
force stuff, and it's just ingrained in us.
I have a really soft spot for that movie, especially just because as a kid, like my introduction was the first Star Wars, and I got to live that generation. But in '99, I had a 4-year-old. Well, he's still my son. He's just a lot older now. But my boy Joshua was 4. So it was kind of like me passing to the torch
Yep.
and being able to have my own son be part of these new Star Wars films.
Yep.
And his reaction and obsession with them
Yep.
made me love them even more.
Well,
I mean, I
we've never
also loved it too because it meant I could go and buy Star Wars toys again without,
well, we've never
just
had
en
market.
masse.
We've never had marketing hype like 77 was for you guys, 99 was for me,
Yeah.
89 and Batman Returns had
Oh,
huge
yeah. That was
marketing.
huge.
I had all
Yeah.
the toys and I went to McDonald's and bought
Mm,
the cups and stuff like that.
yeah.
That's our lives. Like
Do
it's
you remember the first thing you ever really got into? Like for me, as much as I spoke about Star Wars, the first thing I really got into and obsessed was He-Man and Master of the Universe.
oh, that's
Um, because
my
that's like
former boss loved that.
82, 81, 82. So for me, that's like prime age. And I just became obsessed with everything around it. What about you? What was the first thing you remember getting right into?
Honest opinion, it probably would have been Batman Returns because I remember the marketing, all the Diet Coke commercials, all the toys
Yeah.
that you get in the Happy Meals at McDonald's and Taco Bell and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I still love Batman Returns, so I love that
So do
franchise.
I.
So
It's the dark one. Like,
yep,
there's no doubt about it. There's some pretty from the opening sequence of that film with throwing away a baby into a river.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark, macabre film, but it's a great movie. I agree with you. It's a yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, like yeah, everyone was obsessed with wanting to see that sequel.
yeah, exactly, and it was one of the best. It's is it as good as The Dark Knight? Hmm. Different eras, different styles, but I say it's not far off The Dark Knight. Like that may be controversial me saying it's as good as The Dark Knight was,
Look,
but
I
for
think
a sequel, it was a damn good sequel.
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head though, because it's really about the perspective and the time. I mean, your love for that movie at that time comes from a perspective of being a kid and being excited about all that. When you get to the Dark Knight, you're a lot older, so you come from a perspective, and so you can enjoy those things
Yep.
exclusively and not really even have to rate them because they
No,
can still be both equally as good. It's
they're
just it was a different time in your life, you know.
both great sequels for different eras, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So, yeah, for me, it was He-Man. I became absolutely obsessed with Transformers for a little bit. By the time Transformers really took off, I was starting to, in my mind, age out of toys. I was
Yep.
more, getting up to mischief on my BMX with my friends and stuff like that. Um,
I loved the Beast Wars. I used to go
yes.
leave school and go watch Beast Wars after school. I had a lot of the toys that were going out around Walmart back then.
Yeah.
Beast Wars was a great show for the time.
Yeah, look, it was massively popular. I mean, the last Transformers film was based on really on that, isn't it? I mean, it's really drawing from that
You would think
quite a
so.
bit.
Yeah. Same with that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Power, I grew up with all the Power Ranger toys from, the original series, Ivan Ooze, all that.
Yeah.
I miss those days.
So you're a '90s kid all the way through, mate, aren't you? You're a
Yep,
'90s kid.
exactly, exactly.
Absolutely. So, yeah,
Mortal
whereabouts
Kombat.
oh, Mortal Kombat, yeah. I remember, hey, before I go on, I remember the day I first saw the arcade machine dropped into our local arcade. And just everybody surrounding it. Everyone got obsessed with it. Had never seen anything like it graphically for the time,
Hmm.
nor had I ever seen anything so violent as a game, And I remember it cost here in Australia. We don't. I don't think you guys have quarters either, but Americans
Yeah,
all
we
about
do.
quarters. Here, oh, it's quarters. You got over there. For us, it was 20-cent pieces, so it cost us. It was an expensive game because it was 40 cents a play, and I remember us complaining about that. But yeah, what a game! And then obviously a movie which, in every respect, from a logical perspective, you can go, that's a cheesy B grade movie. I
Yep.
don't care. I love it. I have a very soft spot for that movie.
I still go
I
back and
know
watch it
it
as much
knows
as I
what it
can.
is. Sorry.
I still go back and watch it as much as I can.
Yeah, it's a solid movie and it works right.
Yep.
Um, so you're a Canadian, good Canadian kid. Whereabouts from Canada are you? Did you grow up in?
So I was born in northern Ontario, but like I think about 8 hours from Toronto north,
Yeah.
towards a lot of the indigenous areas.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so, like my family's all are immigrants. My mom's an immigrant. My dad's an immigrant. My mom's from England, Liverpool. My dad's from Libya. So they all just came here and worked, and here I am.
Here you are. Well, that's amazing. Because I'm Australian, I'm basically a criminal. Very, very confident age. So I think we got doesn't surprise me. No, that's amazing. I assume it's cold up there, dude, right? You're growing up with a lot of snow, right?
Used to, but anymore with the climate changes, it's not like what it was all those years ago. I remember I used to live in Ottawa, so that's Canada's
Yeah.
capital. We had one of the worst ice storms recorded in Canadian history, and I remember being, I think it was like grade seven, grade six, walking, many kilometers to school at that age in just snow and ice and everything. It was during the Y2K stuff in '99. Um,
Wow.
it was traumatizing as a kid. That was a lot
Yeah.
of snow and that was cold, very cold. And
Yeah. Like,
if I ever move anywhere somewhere hot, no snow, no rain.
well, that's where I live, mate. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the great thing about technology. I'm in the bottom of the planet in Australia, and my experience of growing up was hot days, like heat,
Yep.
warmth. You know, geez, even in the winter, you could get away with a t-shirt and a pair of shorts.
Must be nice. Must be
Because
nice.
you're a kid. You're a kid. You're impervious to weather anyway. But yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it's just kind of different. But in saying that too, as much as you would hate the cold, we grew up with the threat of bushfires, and
Yep.
sometimes it's so hot you actually, you go outside, you're instantly burning. And especially we got into the 90s here in Australia because the ozone layer that had formed on the planet, most of it formed above us. So for a good chunk of growing up my early adulthood and things like that, we're directly under the hole in the ozone layer, which
Oof.
has caused a lot of issues with skin cancer here in Australia. Every
Yep.
member of my family, except for me, but I assume will be in the next couple of years, get skin cancers cut out just because of the environment you're in, and it
Yep.
hasn't gotten any easier. As climate change is happening, so
Yeah.
and that's
Look.
the thing when you get those climate I don't want to get political, but when you hear these climate deniers and you go, dude, are you actually living on the same planet? Have you not noticed things being colder or hotter? Like, what's the deal there?
Yeah, we're not having winters in Canada much any longer. Like the West Coast and California, it's
Uh,
bushfire. It's nothing but wildfires out there now.
yeah, 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 and they're scary, as you know. They're terrifying.
Yep.
We've had a couple of big bad, uh, scenarios here in Australia, bushfires. One of the most famous one I know from where I live was something called Ash Wednesday, where
Yep.
it literally, Adelaide is a very flat place, but surrounded by hills. And it just, from in the suburbs, you could see the hills on fire, and people were unfortunately perishing. And it was a horrible scenario, but that's, everywhere in the world. If you live in what the tornado belt in America, imagine
Yep.
trying to live there with tornadoes just coming out of nowhere and destroying towns and things
Well,
like
they're
that.
say well they're saying now. I think it was May or June in India, in
Yeah,
that whole area. Like it's almost 60 degrees out there, and
yeah,
it's so hot out there now they can't even work anymore. So
yeah,
global, it's
yeah. That's
happening.
horrible. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So to shift gears a bit, how does a kid from Northern Ontario end up being a male model and a background actor? So my question is, tell me the origins. Were you a theater kid? How did you start getting into either of those two fields?
No, I was not a theater. I did theater in high school, stuff like that, and I'm pretty sure I was a little over dramatic with a lot of stuff I did because we did a lot of Shakespeare plays and stuff like that. And I was always the one, if they needed that angry guy scene, go see him. He'll literally
Turn it up
boot
to
you.
11.
He'll boot you in the ribs and make you feel it. And I don't know what it was. I think it was all those years ago, like 2010s. Um, a friend of mine, she owned a clothing store, and she said, would you be interested in modeling some clothes for her? And I did.
Mm,
And you meet friend after friend after friend, and just you go out and do photo shoots here and there to kill time and be creative and stuff like that. And
yeah,
as I said, I'm a British. Uh, my family are all British, right? So I grew up with the James Bonds, and always want to dress like James Bond and act like James
mhm,
Bond and stuff like that. And I think that's where a
mm,
lot of it started, to be honest with you. And
yeah.
then obviously the pandemic hit, and a lot of my friends were like, you have the looks, you've done modeling for quite a few years. Why don't you go in? All the stuff's filmed down the road, anyways, a lot of it now. Why don't you go
Yeah.
take your habits over there and go do it? And then I finally
Oh,
did. I
so that's
finally,
interesting. You're a model first, and
yep.
then kind of evolved into getting into the what we'll talk about coming up. What's interesting about modeling is like obviously it's very flattening. I mean, anyone who's watching the show, it's pretty evident when it came to the genetic pool, you came out of the good pool, the good end of that pool. There's no doubt about it. So like it's a weird question, but did you know in high school that, hey man, maybe I could do this? This is maybe, or you were completely oblivious on how people perceived you? I assume you got some attention in high school.
No, absolutely not at all. I made stupid choices when I was in high school, eating pizzas at like 10 o'clock at night, and the weight gained very quickly. And yeah, there's some high school
Yeah, good for
photos
you.
I'll never show you guys. and I'll never put on Instagram or Twitter. So just some lifestyle changes, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, let's do it. It's down the
Yeah, let's
road.
do it.
Let's go do it. And Gotham Knights was the starter.
Wow. Ooh, we'll get into that soon. But before we do, I'm going to go and stay on this modeling thing for a little bit. I do know a couple of models myself, and one of the things I learned, and I wondered if you can comment on it, is what I do learn is it's a tough skill set to develop because being a model, you are trying to exude a moment in time or space. You're trying to, whether it's you're modeling a t-shirt for a catalog or whatever the photo shoot is, you have to train yourself, right, to have a set of poses or to psychologically get yourself into the moment. Um,
Yep.
I mean, is that a fair statement to say it's a real skill set and art form being a model?
It is like I know people who are a lot way better than I am, and they can do stuff that I cannot like even fathom. Especially some
Mm,
of the girls that I know, like they can just pull stuff off like that, and I'm like,
wow.
wow. But I always find,
Yeah,
I
I mean
always,
that's true, isn't it? The girls seem to have a almost built-in software program on how to do those poses and things like that. Yeah,
see, I hate doing headshots. I always found they're boring, but anything creative and stuff like that, I always seem to find just that extra uh,
yeah,
spark. Like I said, again, you growing up with British parents, you're always watching all the GoldenEye and Casino Royale, all these
yeah.
James Bond flicks, and you're like, that's what I want to be. I want to be the next
It's
James
what you want
Bond.
to be. And
And
obviously, you also mentioning that you obviously work better with props, which
yep,
is something that can be a great tool for a model and also a background actor. Now, you've just mentioned, oh, there you go, Men Magazine.
that is my first ever
That
magazine that I was front and back covers for. And this was actually
that
done
is
during the pandemic.
amazing. How like that? Before we move on, talk about that moment. You get that, like
So
I
it
mean,
was
obviously, I can't imagine it, but you look and you're holding a freaking magazine with your face on it in the front
so
cover.
it actually was hilarious. We were at a coffee shop, me and a buddy of mine named Michael Nash. It was just
Yeah.
out of the blue. Let's go have coffee, nothing more. And then he brings out his camera and takes a couple of snapshots. These being a couple of the photos. And yeah, the next we say, let's go submit some photos. And Men Cruise magazine, who are really popular in the U.S. and North America, said, "Hey, David, we want you on the front and back covers." I'm like, wow.
So
Not
that's
bad.
what is that? A phone call, an email? How does that come
It was an
about?
email. We submitted photos, and they're like, we want you on the front cover and stuff like that. And I messaged the photographer, and they're like, wow, like we didn't even think this wasn't even a planned photo shoot. It was just we're in a coffee shop. Let's take a couple of photos, and that was it. And that was just during the pandemic, the first after the
You know,
first
as
lockdowns.
someone who's very petty, if that had happened to me, the first thing I would have been sending it to either girls that rejected me or bullies that picked on me or anyone who's like, "Who's laughing now, shithead? Look who's on the cover of a Men magazine." Like, you know, I mean, it must be good for your self confidence. Obviously, I mean, it's very flattering. You know, I assume it's also very awkward too at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, you
It
seem a
did.
very normal type of dude who is not driven by ego. So, in saying that, I would guess you're someone who's very humble about himself and kind of
Yeah,
loves
like
it, but at the same time feels a bit like, you know, uncomfortable at
I'll
times about it.
I'll always appreciate because those are the people who helped me get to where I am. So always come back to the thing. Never forget where you started from, where you came from.
I couldn't agree more. And I would assume in that endeavor, it is not a ship that you fly solo. You need support around you, whether
Yep,
that's family or friends or people in the industry who believe in you. It's vital, right?
yep,
So let's get to it because I want to now talk about you as a background actor and specifically the transition from being a male model and getting that first opportunity. You kind of briefly mentioned someone had said to you, "Hey, they're doing stuff down the road." Can you expand on that a bit more?
So it was a buddy of mine. I've known him for many years, and he was like, he's followed all my photography, stuff for years. And he was like, David, why don't you finally go take the arts? Like, we have a mutual friend who does background acting as well too, and he's been doing it quite a few years longer than I have. And he's like, he does it.
Mm,
Why don't you go do it? You have the look. Go do it. Like there's been
mm,
enough background actors that have become A-listers now. Why don't
yeah.
you go try it and see what happens? And then I procrastinated for quite a few years, to be honest. But it wasn't until COVID that it was until the pandemic where I changed my priorities. And then I just happened to be a part of one of the groups, and it said Gotham Knights is filming in Canada. And then I was like, let's do it. It's down the
Let's
road.
do it.
Let's bite the bullet and let's go do it.
Yeah, it's a very familiar theme and somewhat even personal to me that COVID reset clocks for everybody. Everybody just started taking swings at things,
Yep.
like deciding to do what they always wanted. For me, it was my own videography business, which I've now been running ever since. That happened during COVID as well. And I think
Yep.
that's one of the pluses of COVID that it did give you that bit of a kick up the backside to say, let's do it. So,
COVID
what
COVID
was the
proved life is short,
process?
right? COVID proved
Yeah,
life is
life is
short.
short.
You
Yeah.
got to go and enjoy it. You could be gone tomorrow and have got nothing to show for it, right?
Exactly.
And I've
Exactly.
never
Best
fulfilled all my
decision I've ever
dreams.
made. Yeah,
Yep.
it's the best decision I've ever made in my life, doing what I'm doing, and I would guess it's probably the same, for you. So,
Yeah, I
what
never would have met
was
all
the
you guys.
exactly, exactly. So, what's the actual process of getting onto Gotham Knights? Is it a scenario where you just went into an office? Was there an ad that you applied for? Did you
So
have to? Was
Facebook
it the connections you had?
so Facebook's got a lot of groups where again all the most of the big shows film here, right?
Ah,
Um, so there's a private Facebook group I got allowed to come into, and then I saw a casting call for Gotham Knights in what was that 2022. I saw an
mm,
email and they're like, we're filming in Hamilton, we're filming in Toronto as well too. Of course,
mm.
the first role they offer me is a police officer. Yeah, of course, that
Yep.
seemed to be the trend down the
Yeah,
road
the
going
trend. You're a
forward.
cop, dude. You're a cop.
And I'm like, okay, a police officer, but it was actually filming Easter weekend. I did not want to get around Toronto Easter weekend. Um, so I put off, but then I found out a couple days later, they emailed me like, oh, we're filming in the town next to you. Would you be interested on I think it was the Tuesday after Easter.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's closer. Hell yeah, Easter's over. Easier to get around. Sure, done. And then yeah, Gotham Knights started it, and I found when we're on set, and it's called a background holding. Um, a few of the people around there were like, "Guess what I've just been on?" I'm like, "What? Strange New Worlds." I'm like, and they were like, "Oh, we're bridge crew members in season one of Strange New Worlds." I'm like,
Mm.
one day I'll get there.
Right. Ding. Like, that's the thing, right? And so you're on Gotham Knights and you're a background actor for that. What, like, lay it out for us who don't do that stuff. What is a day like being a background actor? I mean, I assume you learned a lot on that first project, but what are you starting at? What time do you start? What are you doing during the day? When do you finish?
So being my first time, I was nervous as hell. Like you didn't know
Yeah, I
what
can
I was
imagine.
doing. You're up, you're just anxious. You want to get on sets, but it's like 10 o'clock at night. You're waiting for emails to say, David, be at this certain location for this and such time. So you're not sleeping because your anxiety is through the roof and stuff like that. And I had that, and you got to bring
Mm.
certain clothes and stuff like that. So I got there, and then I saw the police cruisers outside, and it had Gotham City PD on it. I'm like, this
Yeah,
is
that's yeah,
I'm
I
a
would have
kid.
been going, yeah,
I'm a
that's
kid.
fucking Gotham PD. I just would have
Exactly.
lost
And
it.
I just said that without saying, yeah, exactly. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I've grown up watching Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever. And now I'm actually in something for Batman. I'm like, holy
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah,
And
that
then,
that
like,
must have been surreal. Yeah, it must have been surreal. So what are you doing? You start your day, do they herd you into dress and makeup? Like
Yeah, so like every typical job, they say, bring this such and such clothing, set appropriate clothing, such like that.
Yeah,
And luckily anymore, I'm always a cop. I'm always a security guard. So
yeah.
typically I don't have to worry about that anymore.
You're the
Um,
good guy, though, man. I think I would take that as a compliment because you being cast as a good guy, as the cop, and that I think it gives you a better opportunity in the future rather than being cast as the thug.
the
You know,
Hector.
the bad guy all the time. You're kind of pigeonholed, I think, a bit more.
I want to play a Klingon once. Please let me play a
Oh.
Klingon in Star Trek one time. One time.
Well, you may have your opportunity in the future. So you do Gotham Nights,
Yep.
and they're long days, right? They're long days, 12-hour days, I would
Yeah,
assume, if not
or
longer.
longer. Or longer.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
Especially on the
downtime during that day. Is a lot of like just waiting for the crew to set up the next shot and things like
Yeah,
that.
like honest anymore, things have changed anymore. Ever obviously, I've been in The Boys, Umbrella Academy, Trap, Thanksgiving, Star Trek. I d- I get featured so much anymore. Like there's not a lot of sitting around for me because they're always being used.
Beautiful.
But in the
Great.
earlier days, it was like on Strange New Worlds when we were first there. It was definitely a lot of it because again, they had to go do their other stuff as well too, right? And then
Yeah.
certain scenes they might not need that Federation soldier. Um, so that was, and again, that was only my second ever time working on a movie set with Strange New Worlds, and we still had COVID protocols, so it was still
Yeah, I was
stay
gonna ask
here.
about that.
So
Yeah.
it was a lot more
But
tighter and
you're going from Gotham Knights. I know disrespect to Gotham Knights, but the production for Strange New Worlds would have been a step up, right? Because they got a bigger budget. There's more
yep,
going on.
yep,
And the first time you're on Strange New World, you're in that episode where you're an injured Starfleet officer. Is that correct?
under the cloak of war.
What
Yep,
was that set like? Was that one of those AR walls
yes, it
behind
was.
you?
Yep.
It
Whole
was.
the whole seat set was a air wide, big, large, wide air wall. It was really cool.
I was going to say because you could be turning around and literally you're seeing what we basically see as an
Yep,
audience member,
yep,
right? You're seeing
yep.
that
No more
war
green
torn
screens.
planet behind you. Yeah,
Yeah, no more
yeah,
green screens.
that's
Whatever you see on the cameras. I saw the moon of Jagal. I saw all the phaser. All the.
yeah,
It was just walking on that set. It's seeing all the briefcases that say United Federation of Planets. I'm like, oh my God, this is my
yeah.
second
Can I
ever
just take one
job.
home, please? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, can I
yeah. But
keep
I
that?
mean,
Can I keep that 3D printed phaser? You can keep my paycheck.
yes, absolutely. Oh, and in saying that too, it's you're in a Star Trek, you're a Starfleet uniform, dude. I mean, not the one member, but
Ah,
you are a Starfleet officer, so you're dressed in the gear.
my
What's
badge
that
says
like,
USS
man?
Enterprise on it, right?
Yeah,
No
absolutely.
matter how inaccurate that might be,
Yeah.
my badge still said USS Enterprise, and I will live
I
to
mean,
death that
that
I was a
moment
crew
though,
member.
and I've seen the picture online where you've taken yourself a selfie when you're dressed in that uniform. But that moment, right, when you first see yourself in makeup, in that Star Trek uniform, like that is, to pardon the French, holy fuck, I'm
Yep,
literally in Star Trek. That
yep.
moment, I mean, can you describe the feeling that you had?
So originally, pretty sure I've told you guys on the previous shows that we've done. I was originally supposed to play in Orion.
That's right. Yes, I
In
forgot about
the
that.
previous few episodes, when they go to Rigel 7, I think it was the Rigel 7 episode, I was supposed to play in Orion. But something happened with my previous job, so I couldn't get the availability and stuff like that. So then it
Yeah.
came a couple, weeks later, they're like, we're looking for a wounded soldier, but we're not going to tell you what the wounded soldier is. So I
Yeah.
go in there, all the costumes, like you're walking in the wardrobe department and you see all the gold uniforms, the red uniforms, the white medical ones, the
They were just hanging
blues,
up on racks, eh?
and you see all the, the rank insignias, the commodores and stuff like that. I'm like, holy shit, I'm really
Yeah.
here. And then I
Yeah.
walk in, they have like a separate, clothed door compartment for all the people to get dressed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I see the and I didn't know what I was playing, so I didn't know if I was playing a human, whatever it was. I walk in there and I see the Starfleet uniform and I see the USS Enterprise badge on my arm, and I'm like, oh, I'm really
Yeah,
here. And it
yeah,
it hit hard because my grandma made me a costume when I was a kid, a data costume, and unfortunately she passed away during the pandemic, so she never got to see
yeah,
me wear it, the real thing.
yeah.
So and then
Uh,
obviously it hit me hard, really, really hard.
yeah, but it's a beautiful in a way, and I can imagine it would most. But what a beautiful way to honor her as well, that you got the opportunity to
Life finds a way.
actually to do it, you know? So, yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine it was a whole sway full of emotion,
yeah.
wearing it, and mate, I assume it's a tight fit as well. I don't think there's a lot of room in those uniforms, right?
Not in those Star Trek costumes. They are. I'm a big. I like. I'm a. I have a big chest. You all know that.
Yeah, yeah,
So those armor pieces. It was a because it all zips up at the back, right? So it's a
right.
bitch trying to take that off and go to the washrooms, especially during COVID
Yeah,
times.
especially if you wanna go, like, go to the boys' room and take a leak,
Yeah,
like,
because it's like
that's a
30
whole
degrees.
thing, right? You need assistance, I would assume.
Yeah, literally. Because every time I tried to take off, it felt like I was gonna pop my shoulder out. Like
Yeah,
you're drinking an absorbly amount of water because it's so hot in there with that air wall, plus COVID maskings and all that stuff we had to have. It's yeah,
yeah,
you had to go to the washroom quite a bit.
yeah, that's crazy, and you're in the thing all day, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but
yeah, yeah,
they knew that the crew seemed to figure out like it's not a job for me. Like obviously he must be a real Trekkie, so they let me walk
yeah.
around the set as long as I keep quiet and stuff like that. And then I bump into Clint Howard. I'm like, oh my god,
Oh,
Clint
okay.
Howard's here.
Did you
And
say any did you get to say anything to him?
I bumped into him. I didn't get to say much to him. Just I said,
Except, "Sorry."
"Sorry, sir, I
Excuse
bumped
me.
into you," and he's like, "Oh, that's okay." And I'm like, "Oh my God, Clint Howard's back on Star Trek."
Yeah, that's the other thing too. You probably didn't know that until prior, like,
No,
"Oh, Clint is back in Star Trek. That's
yeah,
incredible," you
literally,
know?
exactly.
And and
Yeah, it
and
was
then
special.
obviously you're getting set up. You've probably gone through blocking at some point. They've taken you through the blocking of the scene. You go
Yep,
from here to here, and this is what you've got to do.
yep.
That moment when do they say action? Do you remember that moment where they go, "All right, action."
Background action, yeah, because that's
Yeah.
I think the first time I actually did that was when we used the transporter. So it's how cool is it to use a real transporter, be on a real transporter in Star Trek, right? And have to do
Mm.
the whole motion of beaming in, beaming out, and that was absolutely special. I loved every minute of it, and I did not want to leave and take that costume off.
No, I can imagine. But you get to I'm sure okay, no, you never spoke to anyone. That's gotta be the hardest thing though, because you've gone through this incredible experience. And obviously, like any normal human being, you want to shout it from the rooftops because you're excited, you had a great time, I'm part of this, but you're not allowed to say nothing. You got to
There's
keep that quiet as part of an NDA, right? That you sign. That
Even like Hayden Christensen has said all these years ago. I didn't tell my roommate that I was in Star Wars, but I sure made the implications.
yeah, yeah.
Remember when he's hiding up the lightsaber, going, "This is
Yeah.
exactly." You
That's
don't
true.
you. It was hard to
How
keep
does that
quiet.
yeah, because generally the terms are what? From the moment you film until the moment the episode airs,
Yeah,
you've got to keep your mouth shut, basically. Is that right? Yeah.
exactly,
And
exactly.
I think that's some of the audience may or may not know this. We're not talking a couple of months. We're talking sometimes years from the
Yeah,
moment of filming until the release. I mean, recently we
strike.
spoke about the
The strike.
boys.
Yeah, the strike. I
Yeah,
had to keep that quiet for almost 2 years
yeah,
because the strikes. Yeah,
yeah, 100%. And it's the same with the boys, right? As well. That was a long
yeah,
period. Generally, how
yeah.
long is it? I like, is it a year, year and a half? Generally, you have to just keep things quiet.
Like if it wasn't for the strikes, it probably would have been every a year. But we had to wait almost 2 years for the boys to come out because the strikes
Yeah.
impacting everything too, right?
Mm.
But
Yeah, and
it
you know,
like
it was a horrible time for the industry because they were just getting their feet back after COVID, and then
yeah,
these strikes, which were necessary. Let's like
yeah,
they were necessary to happen.
yeah.
But did. did kind of throw a spanner into the works. Did those strikes affect your clearly affected your workload then, didn't it? Because there were how long was it? 6 to 9 months without any filming.
Like the strikes I think the strikes hit in June and they finished, what was it, November? Like
Yeah.
I got lucky because we just started we just finished Umbrella Academy, sorry, just before the strikes happened. So I had a little bit of work, but then I got lucky because I had another job, right? So I managed to ride that out until the strikes were over. But I got on Trap. Trap had SAG-AFTRA approval, so we were allowed to film on that. So that will always be special to me. 'Cause I'll always be grateful because Trap let me work when so many other people were out of work.
Yeah.
Um, so I got lucky with that because it initially was supposed to film, and I think it was in the U.S., but the writer strike brought it up to Canada. Um, and then, like I said, I was blessed. Like so
Yeah.
many people
How
were out
long
of
were you on
work.
that shoot for? Because you are like you're all over the trailer. I haven't seen the film yet. I'm sorry, mate. I plan on seeing it very soon. When they release it here in Australia, that is. Sometimes
Is
it
this still not
takes a
out
little
yet
bit.
in Australia?
I think the issue is it didn't get a wide release.
Mm.
Like it wasn't in every cinema. Like you had to. We're
Hmm.
weird down here, mate. What can I say? We're too busy trying to fight off crocs and giant spiders. Um, Either way, like, you're on that shoot for a bit though, because yeah, it was even in the trailer there were a couple of scenes with you. How long were you on that shoot itself?
Like the we started just after Canadian Thanksgiving, so it would have been October, middle of October. We There was parts in November we weren't allowed to film because they had to go do other scenes for the movie and stuff like that. But continuously, almost from mid of October till just before Christmas, just before they wrapped.
Wow.
So
And
again, that was during a strike, so I'm truly blessed. I was even able to work. Period. And
yeah, absolutely.
I
And
made some
on
amazing
quality
friends.
content. This is globally released
Yep.
film. This is one of, one of the special filmmakers we have on the planet.
Yep.
You're getting to observe him. Probably spoke to him at one point. He gave you direction at one point. Surely,
Yep.
with based on
Yep.
things that I saw in the trailer. Can you talk about that? That's another surreal moment, right?
Like it was crazy. Like
Like,
when I walked on set for the first time, it was just, yeah, so I'm not sure. Yeah, you see, I know you were with Jason and Joe in for Trek Long Island. So I'm not sure if you're
yes,
aware. Like the Americans have AMC. It's called AMC Fear Fest.
yeah, yeah, okay,
So that's all their big Halloween. They'll have all the Halloweens, the Screams, all those movies on TV for the whole month, right?
yeah,
So I was just happening to watch Halloween H2O just before that's happened. And then all but no, I didn't know I didn't know Josh Hartnett was cast in that movie. And then he walks up on set. I'm like, I just watched you in H2O the
yeah.
other
That's
day.
sure. And he must have gone, oh no, not that one. Yeah, I like Josh Hartnett. I one of the great things that I've been really thrilled about the feedback of that movie is how incredible he is as an
He was
actor in
great.
that
He was
movie.
fantastic. He was the girl that played his daughter was Kid Cudi was funny in it as well too. Um, and I got to watch the master in his do
Yeah.
his magic.
What kind of because you've obviously been on enough film and television sets to know that each set has its own vibe, its own feeling, its own kind of style. What's a vibe like on an M Night movie? What's the atmosphere like? How does he run his set?
He's very efficient. I will admit right now that has been one of the most efficient sets I've ever worked on. You knew when you started, you knew when you finished practically because it was the same thing every day. He was very particular about that. And the crew just made you like you were there for days and days and weeks on end. So the crew got to know you very quickly. That's the thing with the Canadian crews. We all work together on so many projects. So you get to know the first director well, the third AD well.
Yeah.
Um, so you just make bonds with these people because they know, oh, he's reliable. I'll go to him, yada yada yada, and just it was great because it was nice and local as well too. So I didn't have to travel too far and
Yeah.
going from Thanksgiving, my first ever theatrical movie, and then I'm going into M Night Shyamalan's new Trap movie. I'm like,
And
This is
that's
not bad.
nuts, dude. Like
I'm
you're
two for
going from
two.
Eli Roth to M Night. I mean, these guys aren't hacks. These are the real deal people. These are super talented
Yep.
artists in their own right. So,
Yep. And look
geez,
how popular
know,
Thanksgiving's becoming. You know, Thanksgiving
yeah,
could become the new Halloween and Scream.
yeah. It's a good film. It's a good
It was a
film. I
great
like it.
film. It was. I knew what I
Um,
was going into, and I went into. Obviously, I worked on it, but I knew
yeah,
what I was getting from it. It was a 80s
yeah.
slasher movie, 90s slasher movie, and I loved
Yeah,
it.
and how do you not love that?
Yeah,
Like wanting to dive into that genre and being part of that genre is incredible.
yeah. I
One of the
wanted to
things you
go. I
just
was
touched,
hoping to get a great death scene. I was hoping they're just gonna go and give me a
yeah,
great death scene.
chop me up to
Unfortunately, that
bits,
did not.
please.
But maybe I'll be in the sequel. Who knows?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. You never
Yeah,
know. Now, you kind of touched on before, and I think it's one of the things that I think not everyone knows is the fact that you are kind of working together. Yeah, there's the same group of people that do transfer to all these movies, and the sense of community that forms from that.
yeah,
And it's probably good advice to anyone getting into it is turn up on time, be nice to people,
yeah,
hit your marks,
yeah,
and you will get more work just based upon being reliable, like you said, being a nice guy to work around. Because it must be hard for these casting people to get background actors are reliable, turn up on time, are not
yeah,
drunk or on something else. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
No, exactly. Like
Yeah,
you, like a lot of them went from Thanksgiving to The Boys to Star Trek to Priscilla, Robin Hood, et cetera, and
yeah,
they know pretty fast. Are you a good worker? Are you reliable? And yeah,
yeah.
I'm there to make their jobs easier. I know how stressful their jobs are. It's their jobs are very stressful, and I just want to work, make magic, and go home just like as much as they do,
Yeah.
right? I'm not here to cause drama. I've been on like some of the boys sets.
Well,
We were there for 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not. I'm. I want to work. If it's too early to be causing anything on sets.
exactly.
I'd rather be in bed.
So at this point in your background acting career, and we've talked about community, are you just now getting emails, or it's still something you have to hustle all the time to get the next job, or how is
I
that
used.
working for you these days?
I think I've. I think I've got such a decent rapport with my agents. Is as you know, I'm always cast as cop or security guards.
You're the
So
good guy, man.
I almost
We
laugh
trust
now.
you.
If I'm not a cop or security guard, I'm not getting emails for anything else. But it's also been my best role, so who am I to
Yeah.
complain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've got that kind of like I said, legit, you've got that thing is not only you've gifted, but you're kind of a warm character. You project this warm, safe aura around you, which is a big compliment. You so
You
yeah, I'm
know
sort of
what?
like, yeah. Like in a Hollywood movie, you want cops you can rely on, you want this guy. Hey man, how many projects out there don't require some sort of a good guy cop? They're in just
Exactly.
about everything, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
So you're always
exactly,
gonna have your work. Um,
exactly.
and yeah, I mean, like it's such a healthy film culture up there in Toronto, isn't it? Like the industry itself is very the television and film
It's
is
booming.
expanding too. I read, like, aren't they building more studios and they're
Yeah,
investing
Pinewood's
more
supposed to be.
into the
Yeah, Pinewood Studios is supposed to be doing some big expansion and stuff for that, for the upcoming Star Trek Academy series as well too. So it's
yeah.
just getting bigger and bigger, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And Star Trek, especially Star Trek, seems to have really anchored themselves up there as being this is where we got the job done.
Yeah,
And there must have been times up there that, gee, at one time you would have had Strange New Worlds going on, Discovery going on. What else was going on at the same time? I think it was 3 or 4 shows that were being filmed or close to being filmed all at the same time in that period.
yeah.
That's
Picard wasn't.
that's
Picard was done in California.
Picard. That
But
was it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
a certain upcoming streaming movie was also filmed in Toronto as well too.
yep,
So
yep.
yeah, they have a great
Yep.
relationship with
Section.
Toronto.
Yeah. And that's exciting too. As a Star Trek fan, I think these direct to um, streaming movies is not a bad idea for them to go. Only because for me, I want Star Trek to go really expansive. I want to see stories from all different eras and all that. And if you could do it in a film, I'm a big proponent. I think that would work really well. And so my fingers are crossed that Section 31 will be a movie that, although a horrible trailer they released recently, I will say that trailer was awful. That movie really is the beginning of a lot more stuff like that.
Star Trek's always been on the big screen, right? So it deserves to go back on the big screen again.
It does, and the problem is, I think with that is the whole they're caught up in this whole global Paramount breaking apart. You know, we've just got our announcement that they've shut down Paramount Studios, and now Star Trek will go back under the CBS Studios banner. So
Yeah,
it's
which I
very
think it
messy
always
at the
has
moment.
been. Which I think it always has been under the CBS
It
brand because
always
they're
was, but then they moved everything to Paramount Plus
yeah
Studios, and it's just kind of reverted back. You know, out of everything that might get affected with Paramount, Star Trek is the one thing that won't get affected because it's their cash cow. It's
exactly.
had a long, successful history at Paramount. They will protect it as much as they can. So I don't feel like there's any really threat to Star Trek in the future coming in
No,
any way.
exactly, exactly.
And yeah, the only thing that terrified me was the rumor that Disney potentially were going to buy it, which I think would have spelt disaster for Star Trek if it had come under the Disney banner. Just because then all of a sudden, you know, how are they treating it? What gets more important? Like what's going to be treated and given the bigger budget? Star Wars, Star Trek, you know, a whole. But we avoid all that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you know,
But
and the thing is
but I
too,
will.
what I'm learning from Star Trek is the fact that like Star Wars, they are making content not for me anymore. They're making content for the next generation.
Mhm.
And for a while there, I struggled with that. But now I'm learning to embrace it a lot more. And, yeah, I'm now turned my mind on Starfleet Academy, a show that I initially went, nah, man, what the hell are we making this? To, you know what? This may not be for me, but you know, I support it and I hope it's
Mhm.
good. And they got good quality cast there
Yep.
involved. It. Paul Giamatti and Holly Hunter for a start. I mean, these are the
Robert
big
Picard,
guns.
Bob Picardo's back in live action Star Trek.
That's
Yeah.
the that's the one I can't wait to see how they what they do with that. So,
Hmm.
which will
Exactly.
be fantastic.
I say with Starfleet Academy, I would love to see what we saw in Deep Space Nine with Red Squad. Give us
Yeah,
some stuff like that. Like those Red Squad episodes of Deep Space Nine were great. Let me see
yeah.
more of some stuff like that. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my own limited thought processes early on, I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking, oh, classroom, you know, bullshit, CW drama. I don't want this. But that's very narrow minded perspective at that time because you're right. In an academy, there's all sorts of training you get, all
Yeah,
sorts.
look at those Deep Space Nine
Military training,
episodes.
you
Some
know?
of those were the
Yeah,
best episodes of Deep Space Nine, right?
absolutely. 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 So, you know, being
Hopefully
involved
I'm
in
in it.
Star Trek,
Hopefully I get in it too.
yes. And now obviously, you know, we can edit this out if we needed to. Do you feel, maybe I'll generalize this, do you feel that and hope that you continue in the Star Trek genre?
I I would love to go back. That's for sure. Like I said, I want to play a Klingon someday, so that would be nice. Put me under some prosthetics. There's been enough actors who have played multiple roles in Star Trek and very visible different roles as well too. So if
Yeah.
they can do it, I would like to do it as well too.
Yeah, mate, there's no reason you can't become the Jeffrey Combs of the future and be in everything. So, um,
If Zephyr Cochrane can play Zephyr Cochrane, then he can go play another human in TNG.
that's right. You can do that as well. You can do that as well. And they feel like we said earlier, the fact that you're building up a good rapport with these people, you're a known quantity, you're reliable, you're all that. That certainly gives you a good, well, to put yourself in a half decent position moving forward. So yeah, and
In the
out
honest
of all
opinion,
this,
like I loved working on The Boys. The Boys was one of the most fun shows that I've worked on. The crew were great. Like, you have 500-600 people there, and
mm,
those were some of the longest days I've ever done on a set. And I
yeah.
learned very quickly. Have you seen season 4 of The Boys, right?
Yes, of course, I've seen season
Remember,
4. Yeah.
that
Oh
presidential scene in the
yes.
first episode where you see me? So that was actually one of the earliest days I ever did on a photo set. Um, and I didn't know better back then, which I know better now. Coffee places are not open at 3 o'clock in the morning, so all they give you is instant coffee. So you better come preloaded now with energy drinks because it's a
Yeah.
long time until you can walk off that set and go get proper caffeine intakes.
Yeah.
And I slept in far too many back seats of cars because you're shooting way too long days to. Yeah,
Well,
it's
in
those
that
were some of
scene
them.
specifically, you're playing a politician, correct? That's
And I was
how
playing
I
a
took it.
cop. Yep.
Yeah. Um, like it's you're there for the entire coverage. Like no matter what, if it's a wide shot, over the shoulder shot, whatever, you have to be there for all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You're like and doing literally the same thing that you were doing over and over and over again. So it
Yep.
definitely takes great discipline for sure.
And
For
it takes a
sure.
lot. Like it's Homelander's right in front of you. Like, dude, you get to be in a scene with Homelander. How cool is
Yeah,
that?
he's a good Aussie kid. He's a nice guy, Anthony Starr.
Exactly, Ryan and
But it's
Homelander, and
Homelander.
exactly,
Batman's
it's
dressed as
Homelander.
Homelander.
Yeah, hell
Yeah.
yeah. And it was actually funny because I was doing the first day for the boys there, and then I was at Fan Expo, so we were after like I think it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then the
Wow.
next day actually was the same morning was Fan Expo Canada, and I'm like, yeah, I'm running on like fumes and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Fan Expo. I've missed. I gotta go be a nerd and go hang out with everyone else, right? So those were
Yeah,
long
yeah,
days,
yeah.
but god damn, I enjoyed every minute of working on the boys.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that was going to be my question. You're one of your favorite shoots, and clearly the boys was. And yeah, and like, without you obviously can't give out details. We spoke about NDA, but you got gigs lined up, I would assume, moving forward.
We shall see.
We shall see.
Well,
Well,
we
I
all,
mean,
let's
I
be,
think it's safe to say you're working. That's all, you know. As long
there's
as
a
you're
certain
working, that's the main
there's a
thing.
certain trailer you see me in already, so I guess we
Yeah.
can't hide that one.
Well, I suppose we can't hide that one, and the fact that the trailer's been released, I think it's pretty well safe for me to say that I believe, without you saying yes or no, that you are indeed in the Section 31 movie coming out, which is really exciting. But beyond that, without naming anything, you've obviously got other things in the pipeline because they're shooting a lot up there, not just in Star Trek, but in TV and things like that.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
It's been a
Okay,
it's been a fun summer.
excellent. What's the genre of film or TV that you haven't done that you'd like to do? You've been in
Star Wars.
sci-fi, you've been in horror,
Dude, I want
you've
to get in
been
Star
in
Wars. I want to get in Star Wars again. That will be obviously the Mount Rushmore of what I've done. One day I want to be in a Jedi, cloak when holding a
right.
lightsaber. But honest opinion, obviously I'll probably never be in a James Bond flick because I'm not English. But um, I wouldn't mind doing the Wick. I wouldn't mind getting in the Wick franchise.
Yes. That would be amazing. But don't cross out Bond because remember, Bond shoots internationally.
That is true.
You never know where they're going to be doing a scene.
I can be a
You just
Canadian
never
double O.
know.
I can be a Canadian 003, right?
That's right, absolutely. Hey, they've not ever come down to Australia yet either. In all the Bond films, and I'm a big Bond fan too, so we could spend 3 hours just talking about Bond films. They've never actually done a Bond film in Australia, and I always feel that's coming. At
Yep.
some point, there's going to be a movie where a section of it is set down here, which I would love. Being a Bond fan too, how do you think what they're going to do next? Do you think they're going to go with it? a young guy? Are they going to change it up a bit and maybe change the race or the gender of Bond moving forward? How do you think
See,
it's going to be in the future for Bond?
I would kind of like to see what they're doing with Wick, do it with James Bond franchise. What
Yeah,
they Wick did with the Continental. Do
yeah,
something like that. Do branch off. Let's see,
mm,
more of 003, 006, Sean Bean's character, any of these other side
yeah.
characters. Let's see their
Well,
stories.
what we did get from the last uh, Daniel Craig series is they attempted to do a complete full arc story with Bond. So we got to see his origin in Casino Royale, to
Hmm.
see his eventual demise in No Time to Die. No Time to Die was the last one.
Yep.
Yeah. So, excuse me. It's interesting to see what they will do.
Yep.
I think James Bond, and it may be controversial because I'm a very liberal person. I'm a big believer in diversity and equity and all that. But I think Bond needs to be the classic British white spy. I just think that's what they need to keep. And if they are want to do diversity, just create new characters in the Bond franchise and
Yep.
spin them off, I think
Yep.
would be the kind of right way to go. And what they're doing with John Wick, because we've got
The
the
Continental.
ballerina coming out, I
Yeah,
believe, with
you just had the
Anna
Continental
Armas, who
series.
is just gorgeous, who I
Yeah.
love
The
and loved her
Continental.
scene in the last Bond film. So,
Yeah, the Continental. So they spin that off in a prequel, right? So
yeah, they
there's
did,
there's
they did.
unlimited
It was a
wealth they
little
could
bit of
do
a
with.
misfire, that show for me, but,
I
I
like the
love the
first.
idea that they were bold enough to build the mythology around John Wick.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Try it with the Bond franchise. Try something different.
yeah.
Like, honest opinion, are they really gonna be better than what we saw with Casino Royale, Skyfall? Probably not. I don't think we'll see
No, yeah,
quality.
I think, and I think you're right. Those two films are the massive standouts. I mean, Casino Royale was for me just
Different.
a mind blower,
Yeah, it was
just because
different.
of,
We never
well, he
saw
was a
that in
young,
Goldeneye.
angry Bond. You know what I mean?
A
At the beginning,
realistic Bond.
yeah, like that moment where there's a couple of moments early on in that chase scene in Casino Royale, and there's one where he literally bursts through a wall.
Yeah,
And I'm going, holy crap, this is a different Bond. And then he chases down the guy. He runs up this thing, chases down the guy. The
yeah,
guy throws his gun at him.
yeah,
Bond catches it and just throws it back at him.
yeah.
And it was like, you've just established who this guy is immediately. I,
When he killed the guy in the bathroom, the first
oh,
opening
well, the
credits.
origin of the opening is
Yeah,
literally that, because
yeah,
that incredible fight scene, and then he turns and does the pose, and we get
yeah,
that moment as well,
exactly.
which is amazing. And having a good villain was great in that. Obviously, with
Yeah,
can't remember the actor's name, but he's a brilliant
Mads
actor.
Mikkelsen.
Yes, Mads Mikkelsen, who was just perfect playing
Hannibal Lecter,
the
the
T.
man that played a great Hannibal Lecter. Yep,
Yeah, he did. He did. He's the one, and was great in Rogue One as well.
yep,
Like, I liked him in
exactly.
Rogue One.
Yep.
Um, and were you a big fan of, like, with everything with Star Wars going on at the moment? We're all over the place here. This is the CW show. We just have a
See, we're
conversation.
having fun. We're having fun.
That's right. Is like my favorite thing they've come out in Star Wars in a while is Andor. I'm obsessed with Andor. Andor feels like it was made for me.
Yeah,
And I love Rogue One. Those two things were, like, obviously related, but
standouts.
yeah, like, what's been your favorite thing to come out of Star Wars in its post um Rise of Skywalker phase?
Definitely Rogue One. Oh wait, no, that was pre,
That was
right?
2016. So
Uh,
everything after episode 9. So we're talking from Mandalorian onwards.
you could say Mando season two. Again, I think we all agreed that Luke Skywalker moment was pretty special, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
what we
Yeah.
deserved.
Well, Mandalorian, what did that do? Like, that completely saved Star Wars in my
Yeah,
mind. It really did. Just to go back to the simplicity, the idea of a baby Yoda was just brilliant at the time, and
yeah,
added this real kind of interesting thing to it.
yeah,
And then, yeah, to see how it's kind of interweaved into the universe on a greater perspective. And yes, that Luke Skywalker scene was, it was almost like when I watched it the first time, I was in denial that it was him,
yeah.
because I'm thinking, there's no way it's Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
And then,
The
holy
green,
shit, you see him in the
the
black
the
robe, you see
black
that
hand.
lightsaber go in, and you see him just tear through those droids.
Yep.
Man, like
Ah,
one of the great scenes of Star Wars, isn't it?
no,
And
exactly.
and Mandalorian has been so important to Star Wars. Now their next feature film is around Mandalorian and Grogu, and I think
Yeah.
that is a smart decision by Lucasfilm. Is to have a movie because everybody loves Grogu, right? And everyone loves
Yeah.
Mando. They're going to flock to the cinemas to see this.
I would kind of prefer to see the Heir to the Empire story more. I
Well,
love, I love Rebels. I love Clone Wars. So I
mm,
loved what they did with Thrawn.
I
And
think you're going to be pleasantly surprised that Mandalorian and Grogu will be the beginning of that. They are
yeah,
not finished with Heir to the Empire by any stretch of the imagination.
no,
If you watch the Ahsoka series, the much maligned Ahsoka series, because I enjoyed the hell out of it, I'm
yeah,
just going to say it. I did. I
yeah,
liked it. That they are setting that up. That is going to be a big part of it. The end of that series, they're kind of now gotten back to the
yeah.
Star Wars galaxy as such, and they're not
The
the
Heir
other
to the
side.
Empire series comics were fantastic.
Well, yeah, look, I remember that as the novelization because I lived the time, dude, where we had Star Wars and then Star Wars just went away.
Yeah,
And the only thing you did have was those novels that came out for Star Wars because it wasn't until 94 when Lucas came out and said, I'm actually making a new trilogy.
yep,
And then said, we're going to release the original trilogy redone. Well, we knew back in 94 these movies were coming.
yep,
But that period from 84, I would say, because 83 was Return of the Jedi, to 94, a good 10 years,
nothing.
no one thought we were getting any more Star Wars movies,
Yeah,
and then I think the next big hype was when they did, it was a time with Nintendo and they did the novelization, had Dash Rendar in it. What was it called? Shadows of the
Shadow of
Empire.
the Empire,
The Shadows of the Empire was the next big thing that came out. I remember where it
great game.
wasn't a
Nintendo
film,
64,
the Nintendo 64, and it was a
great
launch
game.
title as well. It was a launch title for that console. I
Yep,
remember that. But
I had
that
it.
they were tying everything in, and the future of Star Wars was kind of coming back. So
Yep,
which was just wild,
yep,
And I, as we're talking, it's pretty evident we're one of the few that don't pick sides, do we? Like I do find with the Star Trek fandom sometimes there's a section of it that was like it's Star Trek or Star Wars, and I don't buy into that because I think you can love them mutually exclusively just as much,
yep,
and really they're totally different approaches to sci-fi that
yep,
one's science fiction fantasy and one's science fiction.
yep.
Star Trek is more kind of working on the
Action.
principles of what we know as science, but then stretched to
Yep.
a techno babble. To Star Wars being sci-fi fantasy, it's really about wizards and
Yep.
knights, and it's a real classical form of storytelling.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
yeah. Exactly. So, mate, that is well. I think we're going to tie it up now. It's been wonderful get to chat to. The whole idea of the show is to, like I said, get to know some of our cool people in that we've gotten to meet in Captain's Quadrant and spend a bit of time one on one getting to know each other. So, it's been great, and we're obviously we're coming up to um some more shows coming up, which you're going to be back for. I don't think you've got a choice, David. You're going to be back on the Captain's Quadrant to join me, Joe, and Jason, as always, to talk
Exactly.
about what's coming up is Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5. How are you feeling about that?
I have never watched.
You
I
never
will.
watched Lower
I
Decks?
I will be honest right here. I can watch every Star Wars animated show. I've watched Clone
Mm-hmm.
Wars, Rebels,
Yeah.
even Resistance. But the
Yeah.
Star Trek ones, I always seem to struggle with. I can't seem to get
You
into.
seem to
I haven't
struggle with.
watched. I haven't watched Prodigy. I haven't watched Lower Decks.
Wow.
The
Well,
animated series from the old days.
wow. 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 Well, yeah, that's something that I would have been like that previously. But it's basically been Jason who has said, no, dude, you need to watch these. And he's been right because I've loved him,
Well, look at
and we have a
the
similar sense of humor, me and him. So Lower Decks is actually the
well, look at the
type of
crossover with
humor we
Strange New
like.
Worlds. Look how popular that was, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That was that's going
yeah.
to go down as one of the greatest Star Trek episodes ever.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think people sometimes forget the importance of Strange New Worlds, how important that has been for the health of the Star Trek franchise. Because as much as I wasn't the biggest fan of Discovery, I respected it,
Me
but I
either.
didn't feel it was made for me. Strange New Worlds allowed me to really emotionally attach into new Star Trek because it's episodic,
Yeah.
so it's back to the old format, which each episode is its self-contained story with a general overarching plot to the entire season, but really it's standalone. And that's what I love with about it because just like Next Generation, which we both love, the great thing about Next Generation is they really played with genre. Like one episode might be a romantic, story. The
Yep.
next episode could be a very hard sci-fi story. The next story could be, an
Genesis.
action. Yeah, like everything, like every week could be kind of different. And the format of Strange New Worlds allows them to play into genre, which they have. We got a
Yep.
goddamn musical episode. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. You've
yeah,
had Under the Cloak of War, you've had Hegemony, you've had Quality of Mercy.
yeah,
It's been infinite. Quality of Mercy is still going to be. I think it's still my favorite Strange New Worlds episode. Like,
yeah,
not too many can take that original episode, Balance of Terror, and make a remake almost just as good as the original was.
yeah. Yeah, and a lot has to do with the casting of that. Like that, they really spent their time hiring the right cast over
Yep.
there for that series. Yeah,
Yep.
Anson Mount, you couldn't ask for a better Captain Pike.
Yep.
Ethan Peck, his iteration of Spock is magic
Yep.
to
Christine
everyone involved.
Jess
Like
Bush.
every actor in that show is wonderful.
Jess Bush was great with all the kids when we were on Strange
Good
Under the Cloak of
Australian
War.
girl. Yep,
Exactly.
come from the soaps here in Australia. She did. She used to be on a show called Home and Away, I think. Um,
One
and so yeah,
the only thing that pissed me off in Star Trek is I never got to see a Klingon. I was in the makeup chair, and the guy next to me is getting his Vulcan ears put on. So I'm just
yeah,
nerding right out. Like I'm seeing like almost like Spock getting his ears put on. I'm like, where's the
yeah,
Klingon? And there's the Andorian guy as well too. I'm like, how cool is
yeah.
this? But I don't get to see a Klingon. I'm like, come on.
To see a Klingon. I think what they're doing here with the Klingons now is probably stepping back because I think the biggest problem they had with the Klingon was the complete redesign in Discovery, which
Discovery.
didn't hit well with all fans.
Yeah,
And as
it
you can
didn't.
tell by the time we got to see them last in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, they were more looking like the Berman era Klingon, which I think is the best looking
Yep.
Klingon. Like, I appreciate they wanted to go far more alien like, but no, you know what I
No.
mean? I like that. I'm selfish like that. I love the old shows. What can I say? What
Oh,
can I say?
exactly. Well,
Well,
you still
David,
gotta cater. You still gotta cater to your original people that watch the show too, right? It's like Discovery made a lot of mistakes. We all know that, but I
mm,
always appreciate is a lot of my friends got to work on Discovery, so it allowed them to have a job. So I'll always be appreciative that those people got to enjoy Star Trek, and it gave us Strange New Worlds, right? So
well, the fact of the matter is, mate, if there's no Discovery, there is no Strange New Worlds, there is no Picard, there is no Starfleet Academy, there is no
um,
Section 31. Discovery was important, even though it may not have been something that I loved. The importance of it was there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because of the mistakes they made from there, they learned, and now they're giving us Strange New Worlds, which to me, although not every episode is a home run, it's still
most
one of the strongest Star Trek shows I've ever seen. So
Yep, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And I got to be
exactly.
in it, so you got a friend who got to be in it, right?
And that's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. It's those things because we've all had those moments in life where you actually have those surreal moments. Like I had one recently, being able to hang out with Ethan Phillips for an hour and
Yeah,
interview him and have a great conversation. That was a surreal moment. And then the moment I got to have with him, just me and him off stage
yeah,
afterwards, is something. that's magic and
It's a
surreal,
life
isn't it? And
changing.
it
It's a
just
life changing moment. It's like, yeah, you
it
got to do
is.
that. You got to do that professionally as your job. Like
Yeah, yeah, and the
5 years ago, you
and the
no,
crazy thing was, Ethan Phillips, even prior to Star Trek, I'd been watching him since I was a kid because he used to be in a sitcom called Benson,
yep,
which I used to watch, which also had Odo in it as well.
yep,
And that was a show from the early 80s. And I'd seen him in films and things like that. I
yep,
loved him in a movie made by an Australian director called Green Card, which I didn't know was his favorite project he's ever worked on. So we
yep.
geeked out on that. So, yeah, you have those
And
moments. It's great,
and you got to geek out with the butt bugs with the admiral, right, or the captain from.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the captain's quadrant's favorite episode, right?
So I had one of these stick butt bugs. I think it's on the video. And I'm
Yep,
tracing around how it would go up the system. And she must have thought we were just nuts and insane. But yeah, no,
exactly.
it's
Hey, it's
my favorite thing to do from Captain's Quadrant is essentially Captain Quadrant is not trying to copy anyone else. It's trying to be its own thing. It's flawed. It's goofy. It's fun. It's honest. We're
yep,
being all honest on that show. But one of my favorite things out of that is, and sometimes I have to be dragged into this scenario, and Joe could admit that, that I get to meet some really cool people. And I'm not necessarily somebody who's very outgoing in that respect. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
once I'm introduced to somebody, I'm cool and I can get along with them. But Joe has this ability, just especially at the convention, just to grab strangers. Hey, how are you? And drag them in and start a conversation. That's not normally something that's natural for me.
yep,
So yeah, that's what I love about being part of Captain Squadron, and this is why I wanted to do this show, and why you're my first ever guest was like you're a cool guy, a friend of the show. I selfishly just wanted to have a chat to you one on one for an hour and a half, as we've done tonight, just to
yep.
get to know you a little bit better, seeing what you got into and some of
We
the
don't.
cool things, and hopefully the audience enjoys our chat.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've been a friend of your channel now for quite some time. I think it's coming up
Yeah.
to a year now since we did our first Captain's Quadrant together. I think that was
Yeah,
was that
it's evolving
October?
and changing as we go along, and I think we're just still like everybody in the genre. I my thing is about just trying to keep it different. Like Joe monitors the other shows and watches the other shows, which are great 'cause there's some great
Yeah,
content out there. As a producer, the guy who does all the design and comes up for segments of the show and things like that. I try to avoid all that because I'm just trying to create something that I think would be fun, and hopefully it kind of transpires. And
well,
yeah, a lot
same
of the
with.
times I'll make myself second place to the show. I wasn't on the last episode
Yep,
because we had a guest that I said to Joe and Jason, no, give this guy time to shine. I know Joe was a big fan of their show. So I said, look, I'll take a step out that week. You do that, and then, I'll be back on.
yeah.
So,
I was watching that show with them. Yeah, it's Jason's a great guy as well too. I chat with Jason quite a bit off of
yeah, yeah.
social
Well,
media.
Jason's been
He's a great guy.
he's one of my closest friends now
Yeah,
in real world, and I met him through Captain's Quadrant, and the fact that I work with him heavily on his channel
yeah,
as well, over the Jason Roy Gaston channel, where we do multiple shows
yeah.
together, and
And you guys got to hang
he's a
out at
very
Star
special
Trek Las
guy.
Vegas.
Yeah, yeah,
Hell yeah.
and I mean, like, yeah, I don't know how we're going to meet up next year, but we will be again. There's no doubt about it. And he actually, I'm going to count this out, right? Just in case my family's watching. If I take out the most important days of my life being the birth of my two children and meeting my wife, okay, they are the most important days of my life, something I proved. But put that aside, I got to spend one day with me and Jason just together, spending the day in New York City. And it was one of the coolest, amazing days I've ever had.
Yeah,
Like, just we travel well together. We were just having the best time, and it was the best day. And I got to share it with that quality human being.
yeah,
Was amazing, and it is
yeah,
something I will hold close to my heart forever.
yeah.
And that's the power of this type of stuff, is that we get to meet people that invariably change our lives, and Joe has as well, without
Yep.
question. Meeting Joe is, and I give him a bit of stick, but that's the fun of it, and he knows I'm only kidding. I always give him a bit of stick, but he's been really important as well. I mean, the fact that we've got a loudmouth Aussie, a New York guy, and a Texan who do a live show every week,
Yep.
that's nuts. That's
Exactly.
insane. That is pretty
Exactly.
cool.
Joe's been great. Like Joe did so much for me as well too, so I'll always be grateful for Joe's friendship as well too.
Joe
It's
is one of the most selfless individuals you'll ever meet.
yep.
He absolutely is all about people.
Yep.
And yeah, yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, without him, I wouldn't have gotten to New York.
Yep.
Just period. There's no arguing that. There's no like over exemplifying it. That's the truth. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have gotten to New York a couple of months ago. So,
Yep.
I'm very lucky. Got a great team, meeting great people like yourself, David. It's been awesome to have a one-on-one chat. But like I said, the conversation will continue because we'll be having you back on very, very soon, and hopefully get you over in the Jason Roy Gaston channel coming up to scheduling. Obviously, hopefully works out for us. But mate, I can't thank you for enough, and thank you for being our inaugural guest on Section 31 and a half Personnel Files.
Dude, thanks for having me. It's always fun hanging out with you guys, and yeah, let's keep doing this again.
Brilliant. We'll catch you next time, guys.